Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. So, I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow, let's say it's the year 2026, and literally everything you've built is just gone. Bank accounts drained, contacts vanished, and that cozy safety net? Completely wiped out. Sounds like an absolute nightmare, right? But what if I told you that building it all back, completely from scratch, isn't just possible, but actually highly predictable? Today we're diving into a very precise, calculated strategy to rebuild your empire using almost no capital, but aiming for massive returns. Let's get right into it.
Listen to this. If I lost my business, my network, and my reputation tomorrow, I wouldn't panic, because I have a blueprint that works every time. What's so wild to me about this statement from our source material is just the total lack of fear. I mean, losing everything isn't a death sentence if you're holding the right playbook, you know? It completely shifts the paradigm from sheer panic to pure, calculated strategy. It really tells us that success isn't about the current assets sitting in your bank account. It's about the fundamental system you know how to execute. And that exact system? That's what we're unpacking today.
$500. Seriously, just let that sink in for a second. This tiny, almost negligible amount of capital is literally all it takes to execute the exact plan we're looking at. You know, when most people think about starting a business, their brains immediately jump to tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in startup loans, chasing investors, massive overhead, the whole shebang. But this blueprint totally flips that on its head. It argues that starting with just $500 isn't a handicap, it's actually your biggest advantage. It forces you to be lean, to get scrappy, and to dodge those expensive traps that just sink most traditional startups.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're looking at the worst-case scenario, the Step Zero blueprint, choosing high-margin skills, rebuilding from scratch, and your next move.
Let's kick things off with part 1, the worst-case scenario.
So here is the anatomy of the fall. First, you've lost your business, meaning your income stream is currently sitting at a solid zero. Second, you've lost your network, so no calling in favors, no warm leads, no safety net of industry peers. Third, you've lost your reputation, you're a complete unknown. And fourth, you have exactly $500 left to your name. Now, I know that sounds incredibly daunting, but here's the thing. This isn't a list of permanent failures. This is exactly where our blueprint begins. By accepting these extreme constraints, you actually eliminate the paralysis of having too many options. You literally have nothing to lose, which makes you dangerous, hungry, and highly focused.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Step Zero Blueprint. The old way of doing things heavily pushes this idea of expensive startups, that crippling myth that you absolutely need massive capital, a warehouse full of physical inventory, and a huge team just to get off the ground. Honestly, it's a high-risk game that just burns through cash. But contrast that against the empowering reality of the blueprint. When your capital is extremely low, you pivot to a model where your own capabilities generate the revenue. This drastically reduces your financial risk while completely maximizing your profit potential. It's a real game changer.
Which brings us to Section 3, choosing high-margin skills.
So what exactly is a high-margin skill? Well, it's a service or ability requiring very low financial capital to execute, but it generates high value and revenue. Think about it. If you sell a physical product, your margins just get eaten alive by manufacturing, shipping, warehousing, all of it. But a high-margin skill? Things like copywriting, web design, SEO consulting, or coding, that lives entirely in your head. It might cost you literally $0 to actually deliver the work, but because you're solving a massive, painful problem for a client, they are going to pay a premium. This right here is the secret to avoiding those massive startup costs. Your $500 isn't going into dusty inventory. It's going into a basic web connection, a domain name, or just keeping the lights on while you execute a skill that is practically pure profit.
All right, let's look at Section 4, rebuilding from scratch. Here is the exact roadmap to that $10K a month. Step 1, adopt a Step Zero mindset. You really have to accept that you're starting over and just check your ego at the door. Step 2, master a high-margin skill. Dedicate your time to becoming completely undeniable at a service that costs you nothing to deliver but commands high fees. Step 3, leverage that $500 budget for absolute bare-bone essentials, like targeted outreach or a basic clean portfolio. And finally, Step 4, scale to $10K a month. Because your margins are so high, you don't need thousands of customers. Actually, scratch that. You really just need a handful of clients who are more than happy to pay for the incredible value you now provide. Each step logically builds on the last, creating a rock-solid revenue stream without ever needing insider connections.
Focus entirely on the skill, not the startup costs. I really want you to treat this as your personal mantra.
Whenever you start feeling overwhelmed by what you don't have, the money, the fancy network, the corner office, just return to this phrase. Mastering a high-margin skill will beat having a massive budget or deep connections every single time. Why? Because skill directly creates value. All those typical startup costs, they're mostly just a distraction. Your ability to actually deliver results for people, that is the real business.
And finally, Section 5, your next move.
I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought from our source material. If everything disappeared tomorrow, what high-margin skill would save you? It's such an empowering question to ask yourself right now, today, well before a worst-case scenario ever even happens. Do you already have a skill that costs nothing to deploy but holds massive value in the marketplace? If you don't have one quite yet, well, that is exactly where your step 0 begins. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this blueprint gives you the clarity and the confidence to start building no matter where you're starting from.